to dissent, the motion and
Yeah, Alex
the
gets
second.
10 minutes now.
No, we're not gonna give Alex 10 minutes.
11.
No, we really need to continue time.
Hi, I'm Alex Gillen with Bull Sugar. I'm an attorney. I also used to work on the Hill, and I also wrote a lot of this with Congressman Mass' staff and with some lobbyists that we've hired in DC. The first one's name is Drew Willison. Drew was the subcommittee clerk of Energy and Water Appropriations, so the jurisdiction that has the Army Corps of Engineers. He also was the chief of staff to Harry Reid, the minority leader, I believe at the time, and the Senate Sergeant of Arms, very experienced attorney. The other was Roger Cockrell. Roger spent 20 years in the Army Corps Program Office and then another 10 working for Democrats and Republicans in the Senate Energy and Water Appropriations.
What's his last name?
Cockrell. Cocrell. So they've offered to come down to another meeting and visit with anybody that has questions about this language. This language is going to the Army Corps engineers, attorneys in DC. They said they don't love it because they don't want to have to look at water quality and safety, but it would work. So let's go through a few things about this. So I love Marty. I love Marty's passion. I love the people in this room's passion. And Bob Graham recently said, you know, you don't get better at playing tennis by not playing, and democracy is the same way. So it's good to have a debate, it's good to have dissent, but unfortunately I disagree with what Mark said. Not only factually, but in terms of the operations of the bill. So just a couple of things first. The definition of health and human safety. This is the main part of the bill. The bill really has three main parts, right? So the first is the 1948 Central and Southern Florida. Well, it's the water, what's it called? The Central and Southern Florida Project. This 70-page document written over 70 years ago is what sets the operational priorities for Lake Okeechobee right now and the rest of the Central and Southern Florida system. These include irrigation, navigation, recreation, enhancements of fish and wildlife, and flood control. And so this 70-page report inarticulately creates the priorities. What we are doing is we are not eliminating those priorities. We are creating a priority on top of it that says health and human safety. Now, I didn't hear Marty talk about something that's very important, canary in the coal mine. We just had a dog die here. We've had a lot of dogs get sick here. If you think that people aren't getting sick, then you're making a big mistake. If you think COVID is a big, important issue, you're making a mistake. The Army Corps doesn't look at the water quality they send us. They point the gun and they hit click. They don't care what's in it. They don't even keep records of how much cyanobacteria is coming into it. Is that acceptable to anyone in this room?
Responsibility for water quality.
The state is delegated responsibility for water quality under the Clean Water Act, Kenny. It's not exclusively a state responsibility.
It's the state's fault, Alex. Come on, hey.
State.
Hey, let him talk, please. Go, Alex.
Thank you, Marty. So that's kind of the big picture, right? We have to revisit these priorities. At the 2017 Everglades Coalition Conference, Senator Bob Graham stood up and said, Congress needs to visit these priorities. That is what this bill does, right? There's two issues in Everglades restoration. We have infrastructure and we have operations. And what we do with SERP and what we do in trying to fix a lot of these things is about the infrastructure. What we don't talk about is the operations. So when we talk about deep well injection, the main justification for deep well injection is, well, we need something fast because we don't know how long this reservoir is going to take. This is a human health crisis. We don't know how long this is going to take. We need to do something quickly. We need to spend $400 million on deep well injection. $400 million, right? Unproven, $400 million. So they can't do it without an appropriation from the state legislature. So it's not just going to happen without a debate. A. B. What's another way we can change this without spending a dime? Operations. Operations. If we change the operational priorities, we will change how the system is managed. This does that. As far as the tribe and the tribe's issues here, Section B, 1B, which is right here, So present discharges containing cyanobacteria or related toxins into the St. Lucie, Caloosahatchee, and other areas where such cyanobacteria or related toxins will cause or exacerbate public health risks.
It's vague. It's vague.
It's inclusive of all of South Florida.
Put it in there.
It's vague. It's vague, Alex.
You try to fix the problem before. You know what, Kenny, I agree with you. I agree with you. If we could rewrite that sentence, I would put the tribes in there, okay? But you know what? It doesn't change the fact that they're covered. And it doesn't change the fact that this bill will have to be reintroduced next Congress. Little changes like that are certainly possible.
That's the point, yes. Will never happen.
So I've never heard of ghost track, but that's irrelevant. Really? Why should I, Ms. Prim?
Because there's a lot of information there.
Let's not help us.
This is about you talking.
Okay, forgive me.
Yeah.
Second thing, master operation manual. So right now, each of these federal projects has separate little operation manuals. They operate these things as if they're mutually exclusive, as if one problem does not impact another problem. That's categorically false. We see it all the time with the draining of the sugar fields into the STAs, into the WCAs, fills it up, then we can't send water south. We see it with the back pumping while discharging. The starkest example was after Hurricane Irma. The whole watershed is wet, the whole peninsula is wet. Water north of the lake flowing into the lake, 5 times the watershed. So a lot of water coming in. We are seeing back pumping and back flowing into the lake. And we're seeing discharges. And so what that does is that puts 2 priorities operating at the same time. And neither of them are health and human safety. We are discharging to make the dike less likely to breach, and we are back pumping to make the dike more likely to breach. And we're doing it under the guise of flood control. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. We had about a month worth of discharges because of back pumping and back flowing this year alone.
Sugar fields were dry as a bone, though, weren't they?
Dry as a bone.
Damn right they were.
And it's the 1948 Central and Southern Florida Project. In this room about a month and a half ago, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Reynolds said that Congress is her boss, and until they change the operational priority, this is what they will continue to do. This act changes that priority. So by creating one operational schedule, we are creating one book. So we're not treating individual parts of the system like they're separate. It's a massive, massive step. It is a big step, and it's very important. The third thing this bill does is it has a study by the National Academy of Sciences. There was just a representative of the sugar industry at the Water Resources Advisory Council meeting who said that legacy pollution in Lake Okeechobee is a myth. So what this bill does is it tasks the National Academies of Sciences, one of our most respected organizations in this country, to study these sources of all the pollution and these soil amendments and say, you know what, let's stop fighting about where all this came from. Let's have the best science organization in this country, possibly in this world, do a study and put an end to, well, there's no such thing as legacy pollution. So that's what the bill does. It also, in the back, it says, nothing in this section, this is section F3, nothing in this section, F1, nothing in this section shall be construed to alter or amend the water rights compact between the state of Florida and the Seminole tribe and the Miccosukee tribe, or the Miccosukee tribe's access to water. So you know, the tribe was thought about.
But they weren't brought to the table, Alex.
So we can have a conversation afterwards about how laws are made. But that's all we have for now. But we're happy to continue to talk about it. Appreciate everybody's interest.
As an organization, the Rivers Coalition has a set of organizational policies. And once again, I want to remind everybody, we are a 501c3. We do not endorse any candidates in the room. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Okay, so Marty, why don't you take over?
That's Jim.
So, There is a motion and a second on the floor.
I call the question.
We have the question is called. So, it stops the debate. What is your point, sir?
I call the question.
The question has been called, so after the vote, you can ask the question.
How can you vote if you don't have other questions?
Well, there is that. So, George, are you willing
Parliamentary
to?
procedure, get the questions out, there's been discussion, if somebody from the floor calls for questions, it's done.
The question has
Go to Robert's Rules of Order and look at it.
Well, I mean, I can.
I can withdraw it. I withdraw the question. I withdraw the question.
You asked us two questions.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike, I got two questions. One, how many, there's 19 congressional seats in the whole system there, on the water. How many of them have endorsed this bill, HR 670? How many have endorsed it to go with the vote?
Alex, do you know the answer?
I'm not sure how many public co-sponsors there are yet. I know there's people in the works. I forgot to mention that Aaron
Okay, no one has
Brockovich-
endorsed it yet.
Aaron
Thank you.
Brockovich endorsed it.
Okay, the session ends in 2 weeks, is that correct?
They'll have a session most likely after the election.
I'd like to see that one.
And Doug sessions happen pretty much every cycle.
We have another question right there.
There is, as of 2007, 100 million pounds of total phosphorus in the top 4 inches of the sediment as legacy phosphorus in Lake Okeechobee. Number two, the second question I have is this. If that bill passes, there's approximately 150 billion gallons of water that is needed from Lake Okeechobee to the Caloosahatchee as essential to keep salt water front. So there has to be some kind of provision, because if this is followed, that means that the Caloosahatchee becomes salty all the way up into Lake Okeechobee, and that doesn't make sense.
I'm Jackie Thurlow-Lippich, and I am a member of the leadership team, but I'm speaking this as myself, if that's possible. I would like to say I am in support of this bill, and that I appreciate that someone has come forward for the interest of our area. And if you have someone who has come forward with health, safety, and welfare for the people, and we have not had that for 80 years,
Agreed.
we have got to support this.
Not if it's just white
We have
people.
got to support this. And I want to say also, ladies and gentlemen, everything is a political process. Everything is a political process. Everything gets refined. This is just the beginnings of the negotiation. Please support this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just, there's some really good debate going on. There's some good points that are being made.
Yes.
I think our discussion could go on for a while and to consider this. There are a couple of ways to handle it. We have a procedure that says organizationally and according to our policies here that if we have 20 or more members of the Rivers Coalition, if we have more than that, we have a quorum. And if we have 2/3 of the majority president, then that constitutes approval of whatever actions being taken. So there has been a motion on the floor and a second, and now some healthy discussion. Some really good points about this bill. When I first saw it, I looked at it as public health and safety. It was not a consideration. The consideration for all the management of water systems are flood control, navigation, water supply for agriculture, irrigation, municipalities, regional groundwater enhancement, and recreation. So there was not a public health and safety consideration. However, the Corps, in their deliberation each week, when we have a Corps call, reads off the statement in the front that says that the LORS was 2008, the Lake Okeechobee schedule was identified to be effective at decreasing the risk to public health and safety, reducing the number of high volume discharges. They go on to say that the Corps' highest concern for their doing this is potential impacts to the public health and safety of the people. So whether it's the public health and safety of these people or the people downstream or anywhere that those discharges come out of the lake, I think by putting something in the bill that says you must consider public health and safety before you make these discharges, not just navigation, flood control, flood protection, or irrigation of water for agriculture or other uses. So when I see it, it's a no-brainer for me that public health and safety is a really, really important issue. Not just for people on this coast, the west coast, but downstream in the Everglades, and upstream in the Kissimmee, everywhere around the lake that gets water or has received water from the lake. So in my mind, public health and safety is a good thing.
So we have a motion and a second, and we'd like to poll the members of the Rivers Coalition. I think if you go around the room and stand up and declare your vote, that would probably be best.
Yeah, we'll be counting. Daryl Brand, Palmco, Yakla, 4.
Well, you don't need to pass the mic. Why don't you just-
Go ahead.
Yeah, all in favor who are members of the Rivers Coalition, raise your hand if you're in favor of this, and Darrell will take the count. So, okay, you got a count for that. So please let your hand down. So all those opposed to the motion on the floor, also raise your hand. And let Darrell get a count.
So we have 16 for and 6 against. 16 for and 6 against. So the motion passed. The Rivers Coalition. Okay. Abstentions?
Hi guys, I'm Paul Gray from Audubon.
Listen up just for a second so we can wrap up.
And I don't want to start anything even worse, but this is a zipper in a public building, and I can't exit it now. So I work for Audubon, I'm a scientist, and I've talked to our legislative people, and we've talked to Representative Mast, and I think some of this is semantics. This is just the first draft, and this hasn't gone through committee yet for markup, and it hasn't taken public input. It hasn't gone to the main house, it hasn't gone to the Senate. So as Jackie said, this is a first draft. And our concern about the first draft was the prime consideration thing, and we think it may create some technical bureaucratic things in the court, and heck, we don't want to make them more bureaucratic. So we told Representative Mast we're not going to oppose this. We all think he's on the right trail. We think water quality should be a consideration of what we're doing, and so he's trying to address that. We just told him we can't support this version, but if we work on it a little bit, we would be able to support making that consideration a bigger consideration for the Corps. So for now, I have to abstain for just technical, semantic reasons, but we think he's on the right track. So.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, so we're going to keep moving forward. Special presentations, a final report for the Indian River Lagoon. Dr. Lisa Soto of the Marine Resources Council has been working incredibly diligently for years on trying to produce a report card of the whole 156 miles of the Indian River Lagoon. There's been some hurdles and some problems, but finally we now have a report card. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Lisa, who will introduce it to you all.
It's always interesting to come down here and get involved in what's going on. and I can address questions at the end. We've been working, I think I talked to this group about 6 months ago, and let you know that this was coming. And I've got a presentation to go through about like how we did this and what the outcome was. But I'm going to kind of skip some of those initial slides and just get you the results and what we think is really needed. So just to remind you that this report card really reflects what our state agencies are collecting in terms of data and what they're seeing in terms of what those data look like. So we use Water Management District data, which are collected by professionals out in the field and sent off to laboratories for results of St. John's River Water Management District in South Florida. We're going to show you 20 years of data. They're in your report. The reports look like this. I hope everybody got one. You can look at the tables. And this is a baseline. So it's starting to show, in a very simple way, what do the conditions of the lagoon look like in terms of water quality and the parameters that the state is looking at, and the seagrass, which is probably the critical element when you think about the health of the system. So if we don't have seagrass, then we don't have the fisheries and the basis of life really for the entire system. So it doesn't make sense if we're looking at water quality that looks good and the seagrass is really, really bad. We need to be looking at other things. So I'm kind of giving you the punchline in advance. So Marine Resources Council is a charitable organization. We're located in Palm Bay, but we cover the entire lagoon. We do education, citizen science, and restoration work. Our motto has been, since it was started by professors about 30 years ago, science to action, using science and the articulation of that science to guide policy, guide programs. Why we did this is because we've seen successes in other areas of the country, including the Chesapeake Bay, where doing a report card kind of got people engaged in a little bit of friendly competition and also showed people in the long run whether conditions were improving or not. Every year, we're wondering if conditions are getting better or worse. Chesapeake Bay created a report where they scored the bay a single number 23. They kind of put this line like, this is what the bay looked like when Captain John Smith came in 1600. We know we can't get back there, but we want to get to about here. And then they score it every year, and they show over time to their community this slow incremental change. They also went up the tributaries of 6 states that are leading into that bay, and they started to pinpoint who's polluting more than others. So then they get this little competition going with, Pennsylvania, you're really putting some pollutants into our bay. We need our crabs back. How can we get you, to step up your game and pass the policies that we need to save the bay? So it helped the bay recover. So we think that, we've got that same potential here. Knowledge is power. You put knowledge, give people the knowledge that they need, and they'll take it from there and run with it. So trying to come up with what is this score was our goal. What we found was we had a science assembly. A lot of people were involved in that. Over 60 scientists came down to the Lagoon House and talked about if we were going to score the lagoon's health, what would we score it on? And we talked about things like sandworms and algae and different water quality parameters. Well, if there's no target, if we don't know how many sandworms are supposed to be in the lagoon, we can't use that as an indicator of health. So we were limited in what we could evaluate the lagoon's health on based on what had targets. So for example, when you go to the doctor, they do vital signs of health for each of us. When we go to the doctor every year, they take our blood pressure, our cholesterol, etc. If you don't know what your cholesterol is supposed to be, then what difference does it make? If they say, your cholesterol is 450, you're like, yay, 450 sounds great. And they're like, oh no, it's supposed to be 200. And you're like, oh, so I've got a big problem. We got to deal with cholesterol. If we don't know what that target is, then we can't use it as an indicator. Okay, so what's key here is these are the only things we have targets for, and that cover the entire lagoon, and they're driven by the regulatory process. So TMDLs and the need to reduce pollutant loads are really focused on these things: nitrogen and phosphorus reductions that are going to impact algae. Chlorophyll A is a measure of algae, and turbidity, which is about both chlorophyll A and sediment. So these are our 2 nutrients. Everybody talks about nutrient pollution. Here they are, nitrogen and phosphorus. They contribute to this, which contributes to this, which kills this. So they're all related, but they are the only things that we are monitoring in the entire state, or for the most part, in our area of the lagoon. They just added bacteria in some sections of the lagoon. Finally, like bacteria, something that can really harm us, they're finally starting to add that. But at this point, we didn't have that. There are 10 regions of the lagoon that have different regulatory targets. I'm not going to go through all of it for the sake of brevity, but no, in the Mosquito Lagoon, there are 3 different areas. This is the North Indian River Lagoon. This whole area is where the giant brown tide and fish kill occurred in 2016. Central IRL North is where I'm located. Central IRL South, pretty much Indian River County. Down here, the South Indian River Lagoon is divided into 3 areas. The border right here at the very bottom of the Indian River Lagoon North is where the St. Lucie Estuary comes in. South Indian River Lagoon Central, and then South IRL South is down by the Loxahatchee River. We didn't go into any tributaries. The first report is entirely the lagoon proper, not the tribs. So we're down here. Separate targets, so like going back to that cholesterol number, they're different for all of these, and this is what they look like. Oh, no, I divided that. So just to zoom into the South Indian River Lagoon, here's the north area, so you can just kind of see where South Indian River Lagoon North is located. It ends down here. And then Central Indian River Lagoon Central, and South Indian River Lagoon South. So South Indian River Lagoon is divided into 3 regions for regulatory purposes. Okay, the data that we got came from all these different sources. So we talked to over 100 people, and we collected data from everywhere from FWC, Lake Watch, Loxahatchee River, our data, FDP, South Florida, St. John's. We ended up using the state data because they had the largest data set. It was collected the same way. So there's a couple of points I want to make about data. We did a very large gap analysis report because these data stations started disappearing over time. And I'll show you that. So this is the South Indian River Lagoon Central, all of the original data monitoring stations. And this is the South Indian River Lagoon South. Okay, so these are the data points that are being collected. G are the grab samples for surface water that are being collected. And then there's, different, O is other sources. And these are the currently inactive stations and the ones that are active. And you can see that the number of stations disappear over time. So this is the South Indian River Lagoon Central, where the state is only collecting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grab samples from surface water. And this is the South Indian River Lagoon South, where there are currently in the lagoon property, no water quality data are being collected. L is just log data of flows.
Why?
That's a good question.
Budget cuts.
Oh, the why questions are the hardest ones to answer in science. So why is one of those, I'm betting has something to do with budget constraints? Probably. Okay, so here's examples of those targets that I was mentioning, just as an example.
Go back to the start of your 2011.
I have slides at the end that show the years of when they were made inactive, if we can, which I can show at the end if we have time.
Thank you.
But I do have it broken down, and I can provide, and actually you guys are gonna have the PowerPoint, so you'll have the details of that. Chlorophyll A, just as an example, I'm not going through all the targets. This is just to give you an idea of what targets look like and how they differ over the different regions. SaveTheIRL.org, all of this information is out there. We've got it in GIS. You can zoom in, you can look at targets, you can look at offsets and how we calculate everything. The next couple of slides just explain how we did it. I'm not going to really go into detail on that. The point here is that the targets are established by 3 different agencies. They use the vulnerability of the ecosystem when they establish targets. So, for example, the South Mosquito Lagoon has absolutely no flushing. It's a very shallow system. It's susceptible to algae blooms. And in fact, that's where our algae blooms are starting, up at the north end of the lagoon. That's why their chlorophyll A target is so low. They're actually entertaining raising this 120%, almost as if to say, oh, you want my cholesterol at 200? Why don't we just change it to 400, then I'm healthy, So that's what targets are about. Okay. So we calculated offsets by these are all annual center averages, more or less, geometric means or medians. When we did our scoring, all we did was we took the target value and we subtracted it from the actual value. So it looks like this. So if the actual value is 14 and the target's 4, then you're going to have an offset of 10. The difference is 10. Okay? So that's all we did. It's very simple math. It's an annual average, more or less. Then we took all of those annual averages and we put them in a bar chart. It looks like this. When we created categories based on the data. So if it's more than 10 away from the target, it's really bad. If it's between 3 and 9 away from the target, it's sort of bad, and so on. So this right here, like being between 0 and 1 away from the target is kind of good. So yellow The light green is meeting the target, because it's gonna be 0, and then the dark green is it's better than the target. So it's just color coded by the data. If it's green or yellow, it's okay, it's better. If it's anything orange or red, it's bad. And over here, it's really bad. That's like, you gotta get your mom to sign your test. So then we took those colors and we did a score from 1 to 100, so it's easier for people to see that number over time. We want to measure how are things changing over time. Next year, we want the number to be better. We want it to be from 70 to 71 to 72 to 75 to 80 to 100. So we standardized it all into a scale from 0 to 100, and that's what you're looking at in all those tables. So this is what the tables look like. If you have questions about the tables, I guess hold them till the end and I can address them. But you can see, things kind of got a lot worse in 2010. What's really interesting in these charts, and what you're looking at is, this is the year, seagrass, 94 to 2016. So you can see how things change over time. You can also look from north to south and see how things vary over space. So it gives scientists all of these aha kind of questions. And one of our aha questions is really like, what the heck happened in 2010? Because you'll see in the rest of those charts, things kind of start to really go downhill fast. So with seagrasses, this is really interesting. Mosquito Lagoon, it's one of our most pristine areas of the lagoon, and yet the seagrasses are bad. And then the worst seagrass in the entire lagoon system is right here in the South Indian River Lagoon Central. There are zero seagrasses. 0. So why? I have a couple of maps. I'm going to focus on the maps of 2016 and just explain how you look at the maps. We've got them all on the website. The maps, again, let you see things spatially. It also lets you see where the monitoring was occurring. So there are questions about the monitoring data and where they're disappearing. If you go through the maps online, you'll see some maps have X's where these little dots are. Those are monitoring stations that are gone. So you can see over time, so you can look at this, for example, and say, oh, there are 11 seagrass monitoring stations in the Mosquito Lagoon. You can go down here and see, how many monitoring stations in 2016 there were down in the South Indian River Lagoon, North, Central, and South. And know where your monitoring stations are going, or where they're being collected. Nitrogen. One of the interesting things about the lagoon down here is how low your nitrogen concentrations are, which could be a problem if they're too low. So if nitrogen gets too low, then there's not enough nutrients for things to survive. But then if you look historically, they were never too low. So anyway. The other thing that's interesting is this right here. This is where I said that data just disappeared and then they kind of just stopped monitoring water quality at all. That started in 2012 with the last water quality data collected in the South Indian River Lagoon, South Florida Water Management District. When you look over here, this is interesting because it was a lot worse. Nitrogen concentrations were a lot higher and the grades were a lot worse up until about 2003. Then things started to look good. We were all happy and congratulating ourselves up in the north end of the lagoon. And then 2010 is, again, it's kind of where things started to fall